run businesses, but they know more than we do. And they're so good at knowing more than we do, we are now coming up on 14, 15, 16 trillion dollars of debt as soon as they up the cap once again. They don't know better than we do. People who operate businesses over their lives know better than we people in Washington, D.C. Our current economic problem, our stark illustrations of exactly their fiscal mismanagement and what it is for our country. To the point of exactly zero-based budgeting, why not? Why wouldn't we operate our government the same way that our top managers and top household managers as well and commanders would operate their unit, their businesses, their household? What are the priorities for us to be spending money? What by law should we be spending money? I have called for a national audit because I know some people would think that right now we know where the money's going. I know we don't know where the money's going. There is not a single member of Congress, either house, that can tell us where our tax dollars have been spent and where they are likely to be spent if we continue on the path on which we are marching right now. Zero-based budgeting gives us an opportunity to go back and find out what is important for us to be funding in our country with our precious tax dollars. Without that, the opportunity for us to move into a job-creating society. And jobs are more important, ladies and gentlemen, than just, and I like to point this out, jobs aren't just a paycheck every 2 weeks. And Sierra Vista is a perfect, in this greater area, is a perfect example. People with good jobs make for a better civil society. People with good jobs love their families. People with good jobs love volunteering. People with good jobs are great members of our community. So it's in our best interest to get the budget under control with devices such as zero-based budgeting so that we can protect the job creators, which are the entrepreneurs amongst us, who when allowed to fulfill the destiny of a market economy that has been one of the greatest gifts our forefathers gave us, America does very well.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
All right, let me roll on.
What would you like to do? Have them come up and speak here or what? Are you going to have trouble hearing?
I can hear him.
We don't know yet. All right. Okay, we will try. So we'll count.
Okay. All right. Well, since they obviously adequately explained what zero-based budgeting is, what it is it's having the EPA stand in front of Congress and justify their existence to the American people. Stand in front of Congress and say what you've done with taxpayer dollars to make American lives better. And then as soon as they're done and their budget has been completely sliced, send them on out the door and bring in the Department of Energy and have them stand in front of Congress and say exactly what they've done to lower gas prices to the American people. Say what they've done to find nuclear power, natural gas. Say how they've lowered your power bill. And if they haven't done it, then we can edit their budget too and send them right out the door. And right after them, we can shuttle in the Department of Education and say what they've done with our kids. Say how they've educated our children in this state. 50% of high school students that graduate high school and go to college cannot locate the state of New York on an unmarked map of the United States of America. Yet we give more and more control of the education to Nancy Pelosi and nobody else. So that's what zero-based budgeting will look like. It's absolutely what we need. But let's be honest, when a government has spent us into $15 trillion in debt, any budgeting would be nice at this point. But, I'm just
Thank you. And I will read Mr. Antonori's answer. Zero-based budgeting is the process of building a budget from scratch each time, starting at $0, then justifying any increases in spending before adding them to the budget. As opposed to baseline budgeting, which assumes the baseline is already approved and the discussion is only about additions and subtractions in spending from the budget baseline. Zero-based budgeting is a good thing since it would require agencies and departments to justify spending to the Congress and validate their requirements for requested appropriations. It is not, however, a cure all approach, since anyone can come up with a reason/excuse to justify spending. In parentheses, just ask Janet Napolitano. She justified everything as she spent us into a ditch. Without a present spending limit, in parentheses, usually set at the amount of revenue received or projected to be received in, zero-based budgeting alone is not sufficient to cut spending. It can also be very time-consuming and labor-intensive, discouraging its use. A method was successfully employed in the state Senate. Was very similar to the way most families balance their household budgets. We identified an annual income amount, in parentheses, revenue limit, then simply went through the state budget, line by line, eliminating or reducing each budget line. Okay? Until we were all below the state's revenue limit. We then had lines as long as it didn't exceed, we then had the various agencies' heads come in and argue to restore, increase, decrease, shift funding between each of the budget lines as long as it didn't exceed expected revenue. It was sort of a hybrid approach which worked well since many of the agencies didn't bother to argue over many of the deletions and reductions. It worked well because we were able to reduce all over state spending by 22%, mainly because we set a solid target that we were not to exceed. As a result, we cut spending more than any other state in the country. I believe that we can do a zero-based budget once every 5 years to reset the budget, then do the hybrid approach like we used here in Arizona. We must also have a balanced budget amendment at the federal level like we do here in Arizona so we can lock in revenue limit, a key part of controlled spending. Okay. Second question to Mr. Sitton first. Do you feel that we need to add nuclear power to our energy production here in the USA? If your answer is yes, how would you accomplish this? 2 minutes.
We understand that nuclear power is an important energy source that allows us to save fossil fuel energy sources as well. The country of France has been operating safely 80% of their energy production for over 3 decades with nuclear power. My God, the French can operate safe nuclear power plants. I believe that we can't do it. Take a look at nuclear power, and I know that there'll be some that will cite the Japanese experiment, and their problem was, why, very similar to some of the decisions we make, why would they place it in a coastal region where it could possibly have the area depth? We do know about nuclear power. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we do know over the past 50, 60 years. I grew up in Southern California when San Onofre went up, and the predictions that was going to cause havoc right north of Camp Pendleton. It hasn't. It's still creating power to this day. Nuclear power can be developed. Nuclear power can be developed if we incentivize the scientists to continue working on ways to conquer fission versus fusion. And that could probably happen in our lifetime. Scientists and entrepreneurs left to their own devices with the proper oversight can deliver miracles for us in the future. And nuclear power, I believe, is one of those miracles.
Thank you. Ms. Sally? Oh, did I go out of turn? Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Mr. Kelly.
Well, they placed that nuclear power plant close to Camp Pendleton because Marines are immune to radiation. Look, only 20% of our power grid is currently run on nuclear power. There's no question that's going to increase in the future. The answer to how we solve that problem is it's the same answer to how we're going to solve so many problems. Remove the government restrictions, get government out of the way, and let private citizens, private businesses do what they do. And that is create a product or service that we want so they can make money and we can have lower cost power and we can have jobs. Power, energy in all of its forms, oil, natural gas, coal, all of its forms is the wave of the future. It not only will bring the jobs we need, it gets us out of this debt and this deficit. It has the capability to do so. I actually just sat down with a gentleman who's trying to get that plant built in Georgia. The plant was already approved. And guess what they have now? They now have at least a decade of fighting through government regulations and lawsuits and other issues that the Sierra Club will champion in order to try to stop the American people from receiving the power that they need. We are so energy wealthy in this nation, it is shocking. We have all the oil we need, all the natural gas we need, all the uranium we need for nuclear plants, all the coal. We have everything we need in this country. That's why 2012 is going to be a great year and why this country is going to do better going forward, because we're finally realizing we have everything we need. We don't need to punish ourselves for being the greatest country in the world. We need to celebrate being American.
Thank you. Absolutely, nuclear power needs to be a part of our future energy strategy. It already is a part of our energy. As Jesse mentioned, 20% of our electrical energy comes from nuclear power. We have 104 plants in America already, but you know the last time one was built? Like 30 years ago, right? So, we have a new reactor that's being built in Tennessee in 2013. We have 6 more that are planned to be built between 2016 and 2020. The 104 plants we have become more efficient over time, but their life expectancy is up 2025 to 2050. That may seem like a long way away, and maybe it is in dog years, but it isn't in federal years in Washington, D.C., okay? Because it takes a long time for us to be working through all the regulatory issues and get these plants so that we have a sustainable nuclear energy for our nation. What we are lacking is an energy strategy. So we see, okay, there's 1 and then there's 6 more, but we don't have a nuclear energy strategy. We don't have an overall energy strategy. Like right now, we have good diversification of how we get electrical energy between coal, nuclear, gas, and hydroelectric. So, it needs to stay diversified, but we don't have a strategy of where we're trying to go to use all the capabilities that we have in order to secure America's energy future. This is talking just about electrical power, but it's power, it's gas, it's oil, it's everything we need. And so the lack of a strategy and just sort of following in the night and reacting to interest groups and environmentalists and others that are taking extreme views in order to have us be not securing America's energy future, which is securing America's future. It's a national security issue, it's a freedom of maneuver issue, it's an American power prestige issue. So we need that strategy, and nuclear power is part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good answer. Okay, Mr. Antonori. Absolutely. Our country is being held hostage by the stigma created by Jane Fonda in the movie The China Syndrome. Advances in nuclear technology and safety systems have come such a long way since the 1979 movie. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, has been the choke point for new nuclear plant approval and construction permits, mainly because the NRC is spending considerable time and effort evaluating designs, locations, and emergency procedures. Simplifying the process can be accomplished by settling on one design that can be duplicated easily and by setting basic site requirements. Utilities and the NCR should quickly identify suitable locations for the new plants. These areas include those with low seismic activity, near a water source, and areas sufficiently out of the normal flight and travel path of large commercial transportation, in quotations, to minimize potential terrorist targeting. This can easily be established. Next, expedite the licensing and permitting process by approving a basic reactor design, which can be updated if needed. Thus does not require a complete design review for every single permit requested. Once the permit is approved, the NRC will only oversee construction to ensure design and construction specifications met or are exceeded. Once built and the safety systems are tested, the plant should go into immediate operation. Of course, this would require the next president to encourage such a policy to expedite nuclear development. Okay, question 3. Bear with me, this is a little bit longer question format. Doc Fix, in quotations, legislation. Scheduled cuts in Medicare and TRICARE fees paid to doctors has been deferred by Congress annually for the past 10 years, and most recently in December 2011, in quotations, when a January 1st, 2012 scheduled 27% cut was deferred to March 1st, 2012. And then, in February 2012, it was again deferred to January 1st, 2013, like they have been doing annually since 2002. That cut under a flawed formula could be as much or more than 30% beginning January 1st, 2013, because Congress has refused to address a permanent fix for this problem over the past 10 years. If this happens, more doctors will refuse to accept Medicare and TRICARE patients. You will be faced with making a decision on this issue before shutting down for the 2012 Christmas recess if you win this CD8 seat to be CD2. What is your position on this issue, and what will you do to convince your colleagues to support your position? Kelly?
Well, this is a very serious one. The answer to the question, first of all, before I expand on it, is no. I will not vote to cut doctor pay by 30% because right now only about 30% of doctors won't take Medicare as is because it only pays 80% of market value as is. If you were to cut doc payments by 30%, no one would take Medicare anymore. It will become Medicaid, where over half the doctors won't take it because it pays half of market value. You cannot do that to seniors who've paid into it their entire lives. You cannot completely restrict their access to quality health care and gut the system that way. There are things that need to be done. They have what's called a sustainable growth rate, an SGR is what they call it. And what that's done, it was supposed to control the costs of Medicare, but these cuts that come about, that's all they've done with it, is shortchange the doctors. So all the efforts they should be making, such as reducing the overall cost of health care, which will then reduce these burdensome costs, they're not doing any of those. Their solution to something that has become a burden is to just simply shortchange the doctors, which will shortchange the seniors. And that is absolutely the wrong route. And the answer is I will not in any way vote for a 30% cut for doctors who are providing our seniors with health care.
Thank you.
No, great. No, go ahead. I thought you were doing it.
That's okay. I don't know what I'm doing anymore right now. This round robin is getting me dizzy. Okay. Sorry. The doc fix legislation schedule cuts, the problem discussed didn't happen overnight and will not be fixed in a single budget cycle either. First, we must not cut Medicare, TRICARE reimbursement rates for physicians further because it will have an impact on access to our care for vets and seniors. We must find other sources for reductions in spending and shift the savings to offset impacts to Medicare and TRICARE. We must also find additional revenue sources. A recommendation I have is to increase the number of oil, natural gas, and mineral leases and allocate a percentage of those new revenues and royalties in offset impacts to Social Security, Medicare, and TRICARE. The way you convince enough colleagues in Congress to support the idea is to find allies both in Congress and in the private sector that will validate and advocate for the idea. Seek out and convince a senior Congress member, in quotations chairman, or a member in the House of Leadership such as a majority leader or whip. Having an advocate in leadership will go a long way in convincing other members. Then, with the help of various private sector groups such as chambers of commerce, physicians groups, and individual citizens, grassroots groups, makes a full court press to convince the rest of Congress to support the concept. Ms. McFadden.
We have to keep our promises to our seniors and our veterans to provide for their health care and have access to good health care. This is a fundamental issue. The situation that was just described is Congress kicking the can. Year after year, there's something that's mandated. They don't want to address the root causes, so they kick the can down the road, and then they don't want to obviously have those cuts because our seniors and our veterans would then have to sacrifice their health care. So they're kicking the can to the next year, and we have to get to the root causes. That's one symptom of overall not addressing the root causes of health reform. The Obamacare 2,000-page bill is another one. We need to get to the root causes of what's going on with our health care system. We pay the highest per capita health care in the world, $7,500 per person, We do have the best medicine, but there's other Western nations that are paying much lower than us that are not under socialized care, by the way. The costs are too high for a lot of different reasons. It includes no limits on litigation and malpractice suits. It includes the pharmaceutical industry that is putting pressure on doctors to continue to prescribe drugs instead of actually care for their patients. We have doctors who can barely keep their books balanced because they're having to spend like 3 to 5 minutes with every patient in order to get high volume, in order to just get by. And this is disincentivizing the next generation from even going to medical school. So this is a small example that needs to be fixed, and Congress needs to get to the serious root issues of our healthcare system to bring the cost down, to make it competitive. Buying insurance across state lines and other things would go into that, and allow the doctor to actually be the doctor and have that doctor-patient relationship. But on this issue, of course, Medicare and TRICARE, we need to keep those promises to our seniors and our veterans that they're going to be cared for, from now on. I mean, period. It has got to be. If we're cutting back the federal government, this is an area that we have got to stay strong on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sitton.
We're talking about Social Security and Medicare. We're talking about the most sacred compact between the citizens of the United States and their government. This was a promise. This was not an investment. This was a promise about keeping your money. One of the interesting things about this is we've heard something about a lockbox. What lockbox? This money has been stolen routinely by both parties for a long time now. It gets back to something on the first question we discussed is where is the money going, where is it coming from? And that's why I still suggest we have that audit to find out how much we are really taking into these funds, how much is supposed to be there, and how much we're going to have to additionally budget, and for how long, so that we can sustain this very important system. It gets back again to the federal government. You know, it's interesting you talk about your metaphors, kick the can down the road. I look at it slightly different than this, and this will give you a perfect, crystal clear look at our absolute dearth of leadership in this country. When do we hear about budget crisis? Is it 6 months out? Is it a year out when they know it's on the calendar, when they know there's an engagement? No. Like the irresponsible college student who waits to start studying for their test the night before, they start whining about the fact that if we don't increase this debt limit, we're all going to die. And that's the game that they play. And that's the game that's got to stop. We need to send people to Congress that understand how government ought to operate, as was described by the most brilliant minds in the history of mankind when it comes to government. And those are the people that occupied North America at the tail end of the 18th century, our founding fathers. They did a pretty good job. And by the way, if we would just simply, how about this? How about referring to that wonderful little pamphlet called the United States Constitution just once in a while? Maybe there's an answer in there, and I can guarantee you that there is.
Thank you all. Question number 4. If a member of the President's Cabinet resigns while the Senate is in session, may the President, under the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Part 3, appoint a successor Cabinet member during a Senate recess? 1 minute. And I believe Mr. Antonori is first on this. The Constitution provides for recess appointments as long as the Senate is truly in recess. The recent appointment of Richard Cordray, as well as 3 others to the National Labor Relations Board was, in my opinion, a violation of the Constitution. The Senate was not in recess, but was simply adjourned for the weekend, which would not meet the threshold of the Constitution. As stated in the Constitution, a recess appointment ends when the congressional session ends. If the President wants to read it that way to make his appointments, then the Congress should immediately turn the tables on the President and state that the session ended the following weekend and vote to vacate the appointments. If the President and his illegal appointees don't comply, Congress should cut off funding. Sally?
Great, thank you. To answer the question, absolutely not. The conditions are clear in the Constitution. that if the seat was vacated while Congress was in session, then the next appointment needs to be confirmed by Congress by the Senate while it's in session. It's very clear. It's black and white. Our Constitution, early on in our government, we would often have 6 to 9 months when the Senate was not in session. And so this is the reason that this was written in there, so that the government could keep working if critical positions needed to be appointed. Over time, that has changed, and we are now using this ruling in the Constitution for the President to be able to get through appointments that are hard to get approved by the Senate, and they've done it in between sessions and also within sessions. Now, the courts in 2004 held up that the ruling, the reading of the Constitution is that the President can do what they call intra-session appointments when, the Senate takes a few weeks off in August and those types of things. But this has just been absolutely abused by this administration. Okay? What's happening right now with those appointments in January is the Department of Justice decided that they're going to tell the Senate when they're in session, and the Senate is the one that decides when they're in session. So it's unconstitutional, and the Senate decides when they're in session, and these appointments should all be approved.
Thank you. Mr. Sidden?
We understand the Constitution now. We've had 2 responses, and they are absolutely correct. I go back to what I said just a moment ago, and we really have to take assessment of where we are today, and even something we discussed a little while ago. Department of Education came about in the late 70s, early 80s. It's been a 30-year boondoggle. It needs to be eliminated. And let me explain just one little facet of it. Not to mention the money that's been tossed into Washington, D.C., discouraging parents from getting involved with their children's education. As opposed, if we were to eliminate that department, move it to the state level, because moms and dads might drive to Phoenix to redress their government when it comes to education and not to fly to Washington, D.C. But this goes to the heart of the matter. Since we've had this Department of Education, I ask you, how many children have seen our Constitution since its inception? It's a frighteningly low statistic. I'll tell you right now, last week's Sports Illustrated had this article on UCLA. There are more words in that article that was talked about in Tucson more than the entirety of the Constitution. People don't have time to read the Constitution. The Constitution is our framework. It is the fabric. It was the greatest gift that with which we've been left. And if we had a clue, and we could possibly educate and communicate to our media that the Constitution
Thank you, Mr. Sidden. I might have cut this one a little bit short, and I apologize for that, Mr. Kelly.
Okay. Wow, the Senate used to go 6 to 9 months without being in session. Oh, will we ever get back to those days? That's heaven on earth. The truth of the matter is, yes, they're allowed to appoint recess appointments according to the Constitution. But in the old days, the president was not some king to be held up in fear. The Senate would come right back in and throw that person right out, because the Senate has the power to do so. But now we have a Senate led by Harry Reid. We hear Dave talk about the Constitution. The Speaker of the House, well, the Speaker of the House before last November, Nancy Pelosi, was asked if the health care bill is constitutional. She laughed. She laughed. They laugh at our document right now. And why do they? Why do we have all these people there, Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama? Because we haven't cared enough to win enough elections. And I know that doesn't apply to the people in this room. They're all Republicans, especially Bill Hess. But we know the problems. What are we going to do about it? Let's win some elections and have good 2012.
Thank you very much. Okay, this question again is several parts, but I will read as quickly as I can. Question number 5. How will you assure that our dollar will be used directly for the student's educational benefit? B. How will you influence that the best teachers will get the benefit of the better salaries and benefits? C. We have teachers in the state that if they take a sick day, let's say for flu symptoms, they are docked that day's pay. Would you support this kind of policy? D. How would you feel about teaching to the students' needs rather than a national agenda? And last, why is there a need for a background check to help out as a volunteer on a volunteer basis with adult supervision in the public school at a cost of $69 per volunteer? 2 minutes?
2 minutes. So 5 questions. Okay. My mom was an educator and my father was the chairman of the school committee, and my mom just retired at age 77. I've personally benefited from a great education at the military academy and 2 master's degrees, 1 at Harvard. I get the importance of education. It is the future of our country. Right now, we got the federal government too involved in trying to educate our kids. So we need to get the federal government out of the business of doing that. We need parent-driven, local-driven education with choice, with competition that incentivizes teachers to excel, and then they're rewarded for excelling. I mean, paying everybody the same and not rewarding someone who's excelling is like what we saw in the Soviet Union, under the days of their regime. This is not America. America is about innovation, competition, local-driven, and choice. And so that's how we need to address our education. We are ranking between 27 and 31 right now in math and science in the world. This is America. Come on. This is our future. So, and background checks, we need to do them because there's lots of people out there that would do our children harm. So we got to do them, but the school should pay for them, not the volunteers coming to try and help out. So that's absolutely critical. Our education is our future. It has got to be in the hands of our parents, the local government. No child left behind needs to go. Testing is important, but at the local level. As soon as it's driven by federal bureaucrats, we're going to mess it up when we teach them the test. And we've got to get our trajectory going in the right direction right now. So America is #1 in education. That's where we were, and that's where we belong again.
I've had an association with the University of Arizona since I got there in 1973 in a variety of ways. I now teach in the Eller School, and I've coached there for 34 years. So I've been pretty intimate with 18 to 24-year-olds and their wants, desires, and their dreams, and their education as well. One of the most diabolical things that have happened in our culture was about, as far as I can fix it, was about 15 years ago. And many of you will recall this when I tell you, not word, that there was a grammar school in Chicago that decided that children should play soccer games and not keep score. Remember that? That was that was a major end of our competitive edge for the time being, because it's artificial, we know that. We are competitive by nature. It is an American trait to be competitive. And we can liken this to what I mentioned a moment ago about the Department of Education. What's wrong in the world of federalism, which was really the big discussion in the Constitution, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The discussion was about what the states would do. And wouldn't it be grand today if each of the states, if Arizona was competing against California because we better educated our kids? Don't you know, folks in Washington, D.C., that companies want to relocate where they can offer their employees the best benefit? And what would most employers want to have for their employees? Good schools for their kids. With no competition to Washington, D.C., it goes right through the entire system. That's part of the problem. There is no competitor for the Department of Education. It has never had to succeed. It's never had to prove itself, and it never will as long as it's in existence. Give that education opportunity back to the states. Let us compete with other states amongst ourselves. Let us show our kids the model that we know, and it was shown by our founding fathers, is that you can have a good debate. And there are winners and losers that are in a marketplace of ideas, not determined by the government or anybody in some supposed position of influence. I suggest right now we get that competition back so young people understand that I may not be the best at this. I don't cry. I find out what I can do. There's a great little story because there's a band. It's my favorite story. There's a young kid in Ireland who wanted to play rugby. He was too small. And they said, go away, you can't play rugby. He said, fine, I'll become a guitarist. His name is Bono. He made a YouTube. There you go. You don't mind.
Mr. Kelly.
See if I can do all this in 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's great. Look, there's no secret about it. How do you get $1 to best educate a child is to not let the government get their hands on it. That's right. But it is the truth. And especially us in Arizona, we are a donor state. Meaning we send $1 to Washington, D.C., we get 98 cents back from the Department of Education with instructions on how we're to spend that. So we continue to take our money out of the hands of the parents, away from control of the parents. And I have 2 young sons now. They're 3 and 1. And Lord willing, they'll make it into school one day. Don't want government involved in it. Government can't educate. Government can't run anything. They can't run an economy. They can't run an energy sector. And they certainly can't run what is most precious, at least for me in my life, and that's my kids. It matters more to me than anything in the world. So the answer to your question is go after the Department of Education and force them to reduce themselves in size and scope. Now, that being said, a lot of people get up and run for office and promise a lot of things. You know, just elect me and I promise I'll save the world. Ronald Reagan got elected with one of his main goals was to eliminate the Department of Education, and it still stands today. Because as Reagan also said, the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program. So I wish I could stand up here to tell you, hey, after we're elected in June, we're going back there, it'll be gone in 2 weeks. Probably not the case. But we can take every step we can to reduce their budget, strip their regulatory power, get it back in the hands of the Congress who can then send it back to the states, but even the states who then can send it back to the towns and the counties where it should be. Even the states should be monitoring it. Parents should not even have to drive to Phoenix. They should be able to drive up the road and talk to the people who are educating their children.
Some of the little questions didn't get quite answered there, but
sorry.
But that's, I understand. But granted that these were, never mind. Okay, Mr. Antonori. Lord. Again, this is a state issue. School choice and parental choice will go a long way to create the market demand for high-performing and thus higher-paid teachers. Much like most professionals in the private sector, teachers should be allowed to negotiate individually for their salary and benefits. The higher-skilled teachers teaching in the most sought-after specialties, such as science, advanced math, etc., will be more sought after and thus able to obtain higher salaries than lower-performing or teachers in lower skilled levels. We have teachers in the state that if they could take a sick day, let's say for flu symptoms, they are docked. Okay, sorry. In my current job, everybody gets what's called personal days. Each year, which includes vacation and sick days, 15 to 25 days, depending on how long you've been with the company. You are free to use those days as you see fit. If you are sick, you simply take the day off by using one of your personal days. If you use up all of your personal days, you get docked pay. As a company policy, we also have to use most of our personal days. We are only allowed to carry over 4 days into the next year. All remaining unused days are lost. This encourages people to take vacations and stops people from stockpiling days. It seems to work just fine. This is on letter D. Absolutely state issues, states and local districts along with parents can decide what is best for their kids. And last, because sick and twisted child predators use the opportunity to volunteer in schools to identify and target children, even if supervised. They don't do anything while supervised or observed at the school except establish friendly relationships with kids that eliminates the stranger danger mechanism. Then after school lets out, they look for an opportunity to prey on kids. Since the kids know the individual, they are less likely to resist or run and become more susceptible to abduction. So because of this phenomenon, a background check is needed for any volunteers that have direct contact with kids. It costs DPS about $69 to do the fingerprinting and background check, so the fee is set at whatever is needed to recover DPS cost. Question number 6. Have you considered exactly how you will avoid being seduced by power? 1 minute. I forgot. Mr. Sitton, 1 minute. Whoa.
I have a pretty good plan for that. I waited 57 years to get into politics, so that means I'm not going to make this a career. That's one way I can avoid getting seduced by power. I've been back in Washington, D.C. I understand that low Potomac fever business back there. But quite frankly, that is the essence of what we've all been talking about today. It's not that we're going back there with eyes shut and, oh boy, geez, I've never seen these monuments before. Been there, done that. We understand that this country is at a precipice right now, as it has been before. One of the interesting things, and this is part and parcel of the answer, is I've listened to the media right now tell you, oh my goodness, America has never been more divided. I guess they weren't paying attention when we had a civil war. It's a matter of perspective. I've had 38 years in this district, in this community. I've had a chance to visit with most people here. I've got 200 businesses, individual businesses that are supporting my candidacy right now. They do that because they know me for 38 years. They know what I've accomplished in the private sector, and they know that is my message for Washington, D.C. It's not about being a politician.
Thank you very much.
Had this question several times before at several different events, and it's the best question I've ever get. And I understand why we get it, because we're so sick of sending somebody back there who sounds great and has the right ideas, and then they just completely go astray and they disappoint us, and we've had our hearts cut out time and time again. And the truth of the matter is, it's impossible to sit here at this table and tell you the right answer, because you don't know. You don't know. No one knows. Washington, D.C. is an awful place. It is a horrible place. It's become the financial capital of the world because they control all the money in this nation. They control everything. The only thing I can tell you is that it's not my goal in life to be in the United States Congress. My goal in life is to be a good husband and a good father while fulfilling God's plan for my life. That's what I want more than anything else in the world. I'm not going back there to feel pressure, though, I'll tell you that much. The only reason I'm running is because I will not cowardly ask others to do something I'm not willing to do myself. We're going back there to apply pressure. We're going back there to get winners. We're not going to act like losers when we go to town. We're going to act like winners, because our ideas are the right ideas. And anyone that stands in our way, well, God help them too.
I've served my country for 27.5 years, 26 years in uniform. If you take a look at power, where are our veterans here? I've been in command. I've been in command in combat. When you're in command, you're handed a guidon, and you are the judge and jury of the people underneath you. Their lives are in your hands. When you're flying close air support missions like we were in combat, the lives of the men and women on the ground are in your hands. I take that very seriously. I've had that responsibility. I have proven that I'm a servant leader who stands up for what's right, who stands up for the Constitution, who will do the right thing regardless of the personal cost. When I took on the Pentagon and we're making our women wear Muslim garb in Saudi Arabia, I was told my career was over, and my career looked like it was going great. This is about taking an oath of office to the Constitution of the United States and defending it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The job description here is United States Representative, representing you in Washington, D.C. I don't see anything about power there. I see about representation, leadership, moral courage, and being a servant to the people of this district in D.C. Look at my record. Nothing's going to change.
Mr. Antonori's answer. By doing the same thing I do now to keep it from happening when I'm representing the people of District 30 while at the Capitol in Phoenix. Spend as little time as I need in D.C., do my job for the people I represent, then getting my butt on a plane and back to the district every weekend and during the recess. That way my wife and kids and the people I represent will keep me grounded and be a constant reminder of what my mission is. By not hanging out with the lobbyists at cocktail parties in D.C. and spending time with my constituents, I'll be less tempted. I will not be establishing a residence in D.C. My wife has made it clear our home will be here in CD 8. So since my family, my home, and essentially my life is here in Arizona, I will be back here every chance I get and only be in D.C. as long as necessary to fulfill my duties. Did I get everybody? Thank you very much. I thank you for your attention. I think the questions were really good questions. I hope they answered some of yours. I'm sure there's many other ones you would like answered. If you want to feel free to stay, please do so. But I would like to thank all of our candidates for coming, and I appreciate their time and effort. Kathy?
Thank everybody for that. I have a few announcements to make. Our HARW board will be on March 26th at my house. HARW general meeting.